So, hi everybody. I'm Dr. Bridget. Used to be, I'm going to repeat a little bit of what I said in my 40 seconds, but I used to be a GP, and now I'm a neuro-linguistic programming trainer and coach, helping people to get a mindset for business success. As you can see, I'm a published author of a book. I wrote that about 18 months ago, and I'm going to today give you a little bit of insight into my story, into George's story. I'll introduce you in a minute, but this is George, and I'm going to also give you some tips about how you actually get results for yourself, and then do a little bit of a self-assessment with you so you can actually score yourself on the things that I feel are really, really important for business success. Because if you think about it, the tools that you've got in business, it's like your website, Chris, you've got all your painting stuff, you've got all your car things, you've got all your internet, Elio's got all his digital marketing thing, and you've got all your things, but really the thing that makes the most difference as to whether you get success in your business is actually the way you think and your brain. So people agree with that? Because most of the people that I work with have sort of challenges, if you like, in the way that they think, so they get results which aren't working for them, and therefore they're not getting the business success that they want. So I want to introduce George to start with. George is someone that I found in my cupboard about 2 years ago. So he's got a really, really interesting story, but when I found him in my cupboard, we actually did some work together, and he's completely changed his mindset, and he's now an integral part of my business. So he goes around doing talks with me, and he also is one of my administrators for my mastermind group. I don't let that put you off. Make no bones about it. If you don't hear all that, he actually's had a pretty horrible life. And he doesn't mind me telling you about this, because one of the reasons that George comes around with me is that the things that he's been through are often things that other people have been through, and the traumas that he's had in his life, and the effect that it's had on his business success has actually been huge. Now his business success is much better because he's sort of met me, and now he's doing what he wanted to do, aren't you, George? So George was born in the 1950s. His parents were really, really young, so they were sort of 16, 17. In fact, George felt that he was a bit of an accident, and the reason he felt that was because throughout his childhood, all he'd hear was, well, if George wasn't here, we could do this, and why did we have George? So he grew up with all that sort of stuff going on. And he was also left to cry in his bed at night, so he was being his cot, and he soon learned that crying wasn't actually anything that got him anywhere. So he started to feel really that he didn't matter, and that was at a really early age, so sort of 2, 3. Then he went to primary school, and because his parents weren't particularly bothered about him in his eyes, there wasn't much money around, then he went in sort of dingy clothes, odd socks, holes in his shoes, and you know what kids are like, sometimes they can be quite cruel, and they'd be sort of going, look at George, or laughing at him, and the teachers weren't particularly supportive, and he just started to get worse and worse in the sense of he doesn't matter, and he would go home to his parents and say, this happened and that happened, and they wouldn't really listen. So he sort of still carried on this view that no one listened and he didn't matter. So in his primary school then, when he was about 8, he suddenly found that he got an amazing teacher who actually, really got him, who really understood him, who took him on board, under a wing, if you like, and worked with him on his appearance, on his clothes, on the way he thought, and he felt really, really positive about that. And George therefore sort of got some of his values from that person about love and caring and support, and he was really happy. But then of course when you're 8, you move up to the next class, and the same thing started to happen as was in the earlier classes. Then you move to the secondary school. He was in a fairly low stream there, and again the clothes issue was a bit, not too good. So it's even more important in secondary school, isn't it? Because you've got to have your right uniform, you've got to have the right clothes, you've got to have the right sports stuff. So he got bullied and teased, and generally had an unhappy time. Although he was actually quite good at music, so he joined a group called Boney M. And he just enjoyed that, and then he found a mentor later on in his life, and when he was in his sort of 6th form or whatever, and again blossomed, got some reasonably good results, decided not to go to university, had a few issues with relationships and things, still wasn't really feeling that he was good enough, or that he really mattered, and that was projecting to everyone that surrounded him. And he did have a girlfriend, but because he didn't really feel good enough, it soon fizzled out, and he got quite miserable. But then all of a sudden he thought, right, I'll set up a business. So setting up a business is easy, isn't it? So he thought, I'll do that. No one will be there to tell me what to do. I'll be the boss, so people will feel I matter, and I know I can do it, and I will be good enough because my mentors have told me that I would be good enough. So he started up his own business. He went into printing actually because he was quite, I think it was Cartilage World as opposed to Cartilage World. Anyway, he started off and ran his own business, set up his own franchise, but he just wasn't really focused. He didn't really set goals. He sort of procrastinated. He didn't get on with people. His relationships sort of weren't very good. So he lost all his confidence that he'd got from his mentor, and started to go downhill. And he went in one of these sort of downward spirals. He stopped eating. As you can see, he's looking quite good now. But at that point in time, he was basically skin and bones. Well, I don't think there was actually any skin there, but basically bones, and just sort of ended up hiding away, and I found him in my cupboard. So that was lucky for him, because the sort of work that I do with people who are struggling in their business, who feel really desperate, and in fact who've been through a lot of things in their past, means that I could then work with him over a couple of days, and he completely transformed his life, he completely transformed his thinking, and we decided that he'd be an integral part of my team and work in my mastermind group. So that's George's story, and it's not that untypical of quite a lot of people in this life. They go through sort of issues in their life, and they put things in their head that creates a reality that's not actually particularly helpful for running a business, as George found. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take a piece of flip chart and put it on my... Do you ever use this flip chart? It's really good there. So what we get all the time is great results, or we get results. And sometimes they're great, and sometimes they're not. So whatever we do, whether we try and stick up a flip chart on this, or whether we load the dishwasher in a certain way, we get certain results, and whatever we do in our business, we actually get results. And I'm going to tell you now how our brain works in order to get those results. So if you think about the brain, I don't know if anyone's got one that size, but seems about right. The brain takes in a huge amount of information, and I don't know if you know how much it is, but it's over 2 million bits of information per second. So if you think about, what's on the floor, what's on the bench, what's in the whole of this room, there's so much information coming in through our sight, through our ears, through things we touch and feel, and it's about 2 million bytes per second. Okay, so that's what comes in. And actually we can only deal with 135 bits of information per second. So as you can see, there's a huge amount of work to actually reduce that to that amount. And what we do is we have a series of filters in our brain that actually mean that it reduces to that. And the filters that we use, and I'll talk a bit about George's story and possibly a bit about mine while I'm doing this, are our memories and our experiences. So poor old George, got left in his cot, wasn't really cared for, sent to school with clothes that, meant that he got a bit bullied and started to feel that he wasn't good enough to do anything. And I think we've all got memories of things that have happened to us in the past where, things have happened and we've made certain decisions or created certain beliefs from that. So, and all of this, of course, is going on at a sort of unconscious or subconscious level. So we don't sit there thinking, oh my God, what happened to me when I was young. It's just that we feel uncomfortable because our brain sort of links it back. So our values are in place, our core values, usually by the age of 7, certainly by the age of 10. And they're the things that motivate us. So our top 4 values in life, or in our business, because they might be different, are what motivate us. So my top values are to have a purpose, to have fun. Fun's a big thing for me. So I wouldn't be sitting here doing this if I didn't think it was fun. And to be clear about what I'm doing, and also to make a difference. So it sort of works through from having been a GP. That's why I was a GP to start with, because I wanted to make a difference. And the reason I left is that I was no longer making a difference because of all the politics and the NHS had changed. And I just wasn't having fun. There was no purpose particularly to me being there. And also, I wasn't making a difference in my mind. Probably was, but in my mind. So that's why I left. George's values are all about sort of, having support and love and, being cared for. So those are his important values because of the things that he's experienced. So we get our beliefs as well, and they sort of hang off our values. So we have beliefs that are empowering, so I can do anything, I'm good enough, I can run a business, I can earn X amount of money, I can have amazing relationships, and they're all empowering. But often people get beliefs, particularly people that I work with, like they're not good enough, they can't charge for their money, no one's ever going to give me money for what I do. Money sometimes is something that isn't talked about, and if you go back to where those sort of beliefs have come from, it's often from parents, teachers. So they start quite early, some of these beliefs. And if you're in business and you believe that you're not good enough, and you believe that nothing's going to change, or it's the government's fault, or whatever, you're not actually going to be successful as if you take charge and have empowering beliefs. And when we also make decisions about ourselves, and those are sort of at split points in time, often when we're traumatised by something, and quite often they're limiting, and they are sort of at the basis of our beliefs. So when George had stuff and he was trying to run the business and no one was listening to him, he probably made a decision then, no, it's just not worth it, I'm not going to do anything. This is a decision he made at a split point in time, or he may have made that, when he was 3 or 4, going back to his experiences. So those can be limiting. And then the language that we use, the language that comes out of our mouth, is at a pretty sort of superficial level, and is supported by a whole load of stuff that goes on underneath what we think, and what comes out of our mouth then is at a fairly superficial level, but it has an effect, and it creates results. What we say, how we behave, creates results. And there's also something called meta-programs. Has anyone done any Myers-Briggs here or anything? Have you done any earlier?
No. Okay.
So it's a sort of unconscious filter.
Meta programs?
Yeah, or Myers-Briggs are sort of similar. But meta programs, say for instance, if I was to ask all of you whether you're a big picture person or a detailed person, if we were doing a project together, who would say they were a big picture person? Because I certainly would. Anyone else? Okay. And who would say that they were a detailed person, so they need to know the detail first? So if we were doing a project together on your 3D photography, or I came to you and I said, oh, I'd like to work with you, would you want to know why I wanted to work with you and where I wanted to get, or would you want to know how I wanted to do it?
I want to know why you want to work with me.
So
Or
sort of fairly big
if you
picture
would help
person.
me with my goal, my question.
Yeah. So that's a fairly big picture, isn't it? So
Yeah,
I know I
it's
want to
very
make a
big.
difference,
It's
so
very big,
it's a
yeah.
fairly big picture. How I actually do it in terms of all my IT technology or what I need to do on a day-to-day basis is the detail. And quite often you find if people are, if you're talking to I'm a big picture person, if I'm talking to a detail person, I feel like I'm on a completely different page to them, and vice versa. So people who are quite detailed, if all they do is talk detail, then I don't sort of get into rapport with them particularly. And there's about 17 meta programs that are going on at an unconscious level, which sort of cause you to do things in a certain way, to filter that information in a certain way. So all of those things, in the end, they end up doing one of three things. So you either generalize, you delete, or you distort. Because you have to do all that to get it down to a manageable amount. So, you know, when you were driving here, you probably didn't count the number of cars you passed because you just deleted that information. Because unless you're a car fanatic and looking for number plates, it wouldn't really make any difference to you. So you delete that, and we delete the vast amount of information that we get. We generalise. So we haven't got any accountants in the room, so it's a shame because I would say all accountants are boring or all IT people are geeky. Are you an IT person?
I can be.
So sometimes you might find people calling you geeky, but they call you creative as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, you know, all policemen are corrupt, all politicians are out to get their own, what they want for themselves. You hear it all the time, lots of generalisations. That's a generalisation in itself, you hear it all the time. But it actually means as well, it's really useful because if I want to sit on a chair or I want to go through a door or I want to do anything else that's got a process on it, I already generalised how to do that. And then distorting is because everyone's got different ones of these. So we've all got different models of the world, and who's got a sister or a brother where they continually disagree with what happened in the past? Anyone experienced that?
Yeah.
So you know, when you're talking to someone, you've been at the same event allegedly, and you've got totally different memories of that. It's just that we've used these things to create a reality that's just different to other people's. Doesn't mean to say it's right or wrong at all. So when we've done that, what we do is we create what we call an internal representation, or it's really our reality. And that's things we see, things we hear, things we feel, and things we say to ourselves. So does anyone have a lot of internal sort of chatter going on? So like, can you do this, or what's going to happen if I do that? You know, that little thing that's chattering away, that's part of this. And that's often is something that's been created by the filtering mechanism. So there's a book called, I think it's called The Chimp Paradox, is it? Heard of that? I think the rugby players use it. It's about how do you sort of calm that inner chimp, and how do you stop that internal dialogue that may or may not be helpful. What people find when they work with me is they don't have a huge amount of internal dialogue, whereas before it's all been going round and round and round and in and out and everywhere. You know, they just can't control it. But that's where it comes from, all this filtering. And then when you combine that with emotional state, so excited, bored, motivated, curious, plus whatever's going on physiologically. Because as we were talking earlier, you know, all of your hormones and all of your nerve cells are connected to everything and all your cells. So the mind-body connection is key. So all of those things all interact, sort of going that way and that way. And when you combine all of that, you get what we call a behaviour. Well, it is a behaviour. And behaviours get us results. So if you're in business and you're sitting there procrastinating, or you're not taking action, or you've got a fear of failure or fear of success, or you know your business is taking up much more of the balance of your life than you want it to, often it's because you're behaving in a certain way because you know your reality is being created from the vast amounts of information that come into our senses. So has anyone got any questions that people came to, a bit like you, Teresa, you know, people turn up on your ward and you look after them, people turn up in GP surgery and you do your best. When you're in business, you've actually got to go out and find people and go networking, give talks and talk to people, tell them what you do. And actually I had quite a lot of wobbles around that, and I think a lot of people do, and that's why I work with people in business, really. So I'll give you an example of a couple of the wobbles that I might have had. Well, I passed my 11 plus, I don't know, and you probably all don't know about you, Teresa, but the 11 plus was around when certainly we were there. Well, remember the 11 plus? Anyway, I passed, and my sister didn't. And that created a situation in my mind, in the house, where actually I couldn't say I'd done it well, because my parents were sort of, in my mind, protecting my sister. Oh, don't say you did really well in that in case my sister might mind. So that sort of translated to me in terms of I can't actually say what I think, or say that I'm doing a good job. And I think when you're doing work in business, you do need to project a certain level of confidence that you can actually do the job and that you're good enough to do it. And the other thing that happens is, probably when I was about 7, my sister bit me. I hope she's never going to watch this, in the school playground. And again, I went and told people about that, and I wasn't believed. So maybe I have just made that up in my head. I don't know, because we do all this stuff in our head. But that sort of meant that I couldn't go and tell people what was going wrong in my life in case they didn't believe me. So it doesn't take very much, just small things, as you're growing up, actually translate themselves into something, a behaviour that means, that you can't get the results in your business that you want. And there's an awful lot of people in business who aren't sure, aren't confident, don't know that they can go out and talk to people, and we can just change all that really easily if that's what they want. So that's what I do. Has anyone had any experiences around this? Because usually when I give these talks, people say, oh, I remember a time when I was there and this happened, and yeah, it does still sort of sometimes get to me.